Sebastião Salgado was drawn to photography later in life. He was 30 years old when he changed his career, but his photographs have become iconic. His dedication to photography and his subject matter emerges from a mix of activism, South American spiritualism, and philanthropic zeal. His powerful style has found an enormous audience, but his work has also sparked controversy. He has been described at various times as a romantic, a voyeur, a sentimentalist, and a genius. Salgado was born on a farm in rural Brazil to middle-class parents. He was educated as an economist and initially worked for the Ministry of Finance. He later moved to Paris, and his involvement with photography started in the 70s, when he began taking photographs to illustrate his reports for the International Coffee Organization. He found that he enjoyed taking photographs more than writing reports. In 1973, he made the move to being a freelance photographer. One of his first projects was to cover the devastating effects of drought in Sahel. Here he took startling and beautifully composed images of people close to death. The murmurings of discontent with his photographs started soon after this work was published, and has carried on throughout his career. It's been said that his work epitomizes the exploitation that is inherent in photojournalism. Susan Sontag dubbed Salgado a photographer who specializes in world misery and thus encourages hopelessness. She complained that his work has a cinematic quality. Sontag was an astute and clever commentator on photography, but she didn't always get things 100% right. Salgado was present during John Hinckley's failed assassination attempt on President Ronald Reagan in 1981. He had been assigned by the New York Times magazine to cover the first 100 days of Reagan's presidency, and was standing in the doorway of the Washington Hilton when the attempt took place. Salgado describes himself as a lapsed Marxist. He was a leftist, an activist, and was involved in political dissent in his own country, Brazil. As his interest in photography grew, he shed his activist roots, but never his humanitarian or environmental concerns. Salgado has a strong affinity with labor and the working class, and he was inspired to produce a major body of work called Workers. For 7 years, he traveled and photographed in 26 countries, producing images that eventually made him a household name. The original book, published in 1987, has a statement on the cover describing the work as an archaeology of the industrial age. It's an elegy to manual laborers and a record of the passing of traditional methods of production. Basically, it focuses on hard physical work that has spanned the time from the Stone Age through to the Industrial Revolution and into the present day. He photographed, amongst others, tea pickers in Rwanda, dam builders in India, steel workers in Ukraine, sugarcane harvesting in Brazil, assembly line workers in China, and sulfur miners in Indonesia. He's continued to photograph workers even after the end of this particular mammoth project. His photographs made an impact because of their epic nature, and he became one of the most sought-after photojournalists of his time. You can't help but be drawn into the moments that he captured. They reveal a vitality and an immediacy. His original book on Workers consisted of 400 pages, and the quality and consistency of the images is truly impressive. He developed powerful insights into people doing physically demanding and often dangerous work, and his images are captured in beautiful compositions. He raised the bar of what was expected from photojournalists. The tonality in all of his images is one of the most striking features of his work. He often uses a play of light and shadows which can be described as a chiaroscuro style. It's a technique that was used a lot by Renaissance painters. The typical images tend to evoke a lot of emotions by creating layers of visual drama within the scene. The term literally means light and dark. The subject is usually well lit, with a transition into a darker, heavily shadowed background. This use of light variation creates an impression of depth and three-dimensionality. Salgado's use of this lighting technique, which resulted in almost cinematic-type scenes, together with the heroic stances of many of his subjects, have caused his critics to accuse him of being too romantic. They say that his images are too dramatic and too pretty. Underneath these accusations is the assertion that he's more concerned with aesthetics than the actual plight of his subjects. In a piece for the New Yorker in 1991, Ingrid Sishi wrote, "It isn't fair to make Salgado responsible for how we do or do not respond to the content of his pictures, but there are certain gimmicks and attitudes in them that seem designed to trigger specific reactions and reflexes that are insulting to the people being portrayed." I'm not sure that she knew how his subjects felt. Salgado and his supporters countered by saying that his approach brings dignity to his subjects and affirms the enduring spirit of working women and men. My take is that all photographers are trying to produce the best images that they can. He just happened to do the job better than most. Other critics have attacked his images for propping up capitalistic exploitation and have said that they reflect a colonial white man's gaze. Some fellow photographers have also criticized him and his work, but I think that much of this criticism stems from envy. Because of his economic background, and probably because he entered the field later in life, he developed a talent for raising money for his projects, and he also knew how to effectively market his work. As his reputation grew, he started to receive large advances for his assignments, and his prints started to sell. These achievements were like red rags to a bull for less successful photographers. one can try to unravel where exactly Salgado fits within the broad world of photography. His photographs of workers originate out of a practice of photojournalism, but they might be better described as fine art photojournalism. He expanded on his method of producing images by becoming hyper-aware of subject placement within the frame, choice of camera position, variations in light, and also timing. I can see influences like Henri Cartier-Bresson in his work, and even some of the old masters like Steichen and Stieglitz. He was different from Cartier-Bresson in that his work was far more orientated towards the series, but within each image he still leant towards the decisive moment. There are no real comparisons to be found with, say, the work of Robert Frank. They might have shared a few influences, but for Frank his primary interest was in ideas and also confronting the structure of society through metaphor. I hope that you enjoyed this dive into Salgado and his work. His picture stories are filled with elements of mythology and symbolism, and he is an impressive guy in many ways. Over 20 years, he and his wife organized the planting of over 2.5 million trees on his family's property to restore the Brazilian forest. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.